Welcome to Stay Focused with C.Robinson. Today, I will be bringing to you a discussion on racism again. It is a hot topic, and therefore we have to keep talking about it, okay? I have 3 short videos that I would like to present to you today. And these videos are on YouTube. And so you can find them and look at them again. But the first video that I want to bring to you is called Understanding Systemic Racism. And put the banner up there. And I will be bringing this to you in a few minutes. Okay.
There's a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named... This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investments. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university. The same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
And so, now, the second video that I want to show you is called, "What is the biggest misconception about racism?" Now, in that first video, I hope that you did notice the word redlining and what they explained about redlining when it comes to your property, the neighborhood that you live in. And another thing I hope that you caught was naming your children. Okay, if they don't have American sounding names, then it could cause them to have sort of like a little hardship being chosen for, for certain jobs in certain industries. Okay, so the next video again.
Until we actually have a conversation about what privilege really means, we'll never really understand what racism means.
One of the biggest misconceptions about racism is the notion that it proceeds because you have two separate races. In other words, there's something natural about racism. Why do we not talk about a Polish race today? Why do we not talk about an Irish race today? Why do we not talk about an Italian race today? Well, because we drafted all those groups of people into something called white. And the reason why we drafted them into that group of people is because we wanted to delineate who got the privileges, the uppermost privileges, top privileges of being American, and who did not.
I teach at Yale Law School. It's the best law school in the country. I have privilege coming out the wazoo in a lot of ways. There's lots of power. At the same time, I never forget I'm a Black woman.
When I sit in class, I would be taught that after Martin Luther King marched and the Civil Rights Act passed and Fair Housing got passed, that we now began to live in a post-racial world. Racism is deeply rooted in America. Violence is deeply rooted in America. Segregation and poverty is real.
There's a lot of everyday discrimination that happens in all spheres of public life, and a lot of that is denied. And if we look at audit studies of hiring in the labour market, there's very clear evidence of racial preference. Whites get preferred over black job candidates routinely, even though both candidates are similarly qualified. So discrimination is alive and well.
New York police officers now come from 106 countries. No other police department in the world could replicate that. There's more of a sense of we have to get along together, we're all in this together, that type of thing. There is, generally speaking, less racism than is portrayed in the media. The biggest misconception And I think we live in the Obama era in which, we elected President Obama and everything is okay. And that's not true. And it hurts my heart to say it, but it's the reality for me. It's the reality for you. It's the reality for America.
Yes, it is the reality for America. Okay. There are some who want to believe that everything is well, that everything is okay. But in reality, it's not okay. All is not well. Now, the third video that I would like to share with you is called How Can Blacks and Whites Stand Together on Racial Injustice? And this video is about some Christian young men coming together for a discussion on racism. So please hear this out.
All right, brother. So important topic. How should white Christians respond and relate to our African American brothers and sisters who are feeling pain and hurt and maybe anger because of racial injustices that have happened to them and to their community? This is a topic that obviously has been going on for a long time, but in God's providence, He seems to really be putting it in the front of the face of the church right now. And we're gonna deal with this. We're gonna love each other deep. Help me. Okay. This is new waters for me. Really, I think about the past 5 years, God in His mercy brought some really good friends into my life. Black brothers I've been serving alongside who've helped me wrestle with some of these issues. What would you say to somebody like me who's just beginning to navigate these waters?
One of the first things that I would say is, even to start off and use that word, respond, can tend to sometimes put folks in a posture where they feel like they have to be reactive. And I'd say with something like this, it's already been brought to the forefront. I think that it's important for our white brothers and sisters to be like proactive, right? So to seek out ways. I mean, it's like I tell, guys in my church all the time, if you have to go to your wife and ask what's wrong, you've already lost, right? You want to be proactive and attentive. And I think now that things have just been brought to the forefront, ignorance can't be an excuse that's used. I just didn't know. I didn't know how much of a toll that it took. Now we're at a time where we've seen how much of a toll that it takes, and we know that it's not going to go anywhere quick. And so one of the best tools that can be used is, all right, I just want to be proactive, and I want to try as best as I can to look at the world through their eyes, and where I see landmines or things that may potentially be harmful or may cause them that hurt or that angst, I want to go to them and give them a chance to talk long before they come to me and have to share how they feel. So, I think that's great. I think that a good place to start with this issue, in my opinion, is to start with the theological urgency. Why does this really matter to God and also to His church? I think we need to appreciate that our judgment before Christ is an ethical judgment.
Okay, so meaning that we're going to be judged by him based on what we do. We won't be declared righteous based on what we do, but our actions will be evaluated. And one of the things that we see this specifically in Matthew 25, is that one action that is evaluated is inaction around injustice. Okay, so if I see that someone is hungry, or is unclothed, or sick, or whatever, I have not moved, that is a basis for an unfavorable judgment. So we need to appreciate that there are eternal consequences to looking squarely at injustice and doing nothing. And so the people of God are expected to respond to injustices. We see that God very much cares about justice. And so I think that if we can help our people to see, our white brothers and sisters to see, that this is a relationship issue, but it's more than a relationship issue with one another. It is a relationship issue with God. Is that if I am not moved by injustice, I have a God problem. And so this is not an issue of our witness. It's a witness problem, but it's a deeper issue. God intends to deal with his people being unresponsive to injustice. And so we need to feel that, help folks to realize that we love our people. We want them to stand perfect before our judge, right? We want to help them to have a great judgment. And so we need to help them to appreciate. I think it starts there, that there are theological issues around justice and racial justice in particular. Now I think it moves out from there.
And it's tied to is a gospel issue. We see in Galatians 2 where Paul rebukes Peter in the Jew-Gentile controversy there. And one of the things that was really interesting for me as I've begun to get into these waters is realizing that there's not one black thing. I mean, we have members in our congregation who are all over the board on how they felt and experienced a lot of these injustices, and we'll have some who would who want to go protest, others who would even say that no, you shouldn't do that, and just any wisdom for us, for white Christians who want to begin the conversation, because there's some trepidation there about like I don't want to say the wrong thing, I don't want to come at it the wrong way. How can I love you as my friend who I want to get to know more about this issue? How do I do that? Yeah. Well, man, I think one of the best things that can take place is just to come at it from a posture of a student, right? Like not trying to prove a point, not trying to discount the wrong, like what's wrong with what I see. I mean, one of the best ways that I think that you can deal with this with trepidation is to approach this as if you would approaching somebody that goes through grief, right? Because it is a grief of sorts, and you don't want to come in and say, well, that's wrong, and you shouldn't feel this way, and you shouldn't want to do this, nor should you ask, why are you mad, in a way that really is trying to find out why they're mad, but it's saying, why are you mad? Like you should be mad, but to say things like, I cannot imagine what you're going through. Help me to understand what's really starting to go on in your heart. And I think those questions, and as you plumb those depths, then I think you get to a place where counsel and advice can be received as just that, and not as a critique from somebody that is clueless about what I feel on the inside.
I think that's great. I think the other thing that we can help our white brothers and sisters with is, I think, to appreciate the history and how the church has not always gotten it right. I think that it's vital for us to recognize that we can have a very compelling profession and confession. We can be clear on doctrinal statements, but struggle how we live that out. We need to help folks to feel that the church, the believing church, the Bible-believing church has missed this in the past. Let's start there. And so we can appreciate exactly how ought we've been, that the conservative church fell during abolition. We're on the wrong side of the freedom movement. And so there's a pattern here. So I think that should create a kind of suspicion. And so let me, I know how I'm approaching these issues. Given our pattern of failure, maybe I need to check my position. And just don't assume it's because this is how we all think about these issues, that maybe this is God's place. And so I think that there's a need for a healthy, self-examination on this issue. And I think it begins, I think it starts there. I would encourage my white brothers and sisters to not start with empathy, to start here. Because it's not first and foremost a relationship problem. It is a heart and theological issue. And if I can confront myself around those things, then out of that, we can begin to engage the relationship.
I'd love to hear some, and I think that it would help for those that may come to watch this. Just you as somebody that's clearly, white. I'm not sure if this is going to be in color, black and white. Here it is, in fact, white. It's true. At the height of all of this, you found yourself pastoring a church with another African-American pastor. And y'all didn't necessarily see eye to eye on this. And there was tension from the top down. And so you really had to work through this at a real level. So I'd just love to hear about it, what things that you learned from all of it that you would change if you could go back and do it. Well, mercy, right? But I think something you said there a moment ago, starting here, that was one of the things that I had to realize this was an issue for me that I needed to recognize that I had really been ignorant for. I grew up in a town where all my friends were white, looked the same, thought the same. All my friends, most of the churches I went to, that was the case. And then now I'm surrounded by people who are different from me in all sorts of ways. But I think one of the things that helped was Shai was the pastor who I was serving with, and I said, Shai, we were having a couple conversations. I said, what do you think about me and you having this conversation with, let's invite maybe 15 or 20 other people from our church. So we were at my house, and he shared stories about things that he had experienced. I mean, I just never heard it from somebody I loved before. And he shared things that were hard, that he'd been hurt. And God just changed my heart to see that life's not the same for everybody. And I mean, it's changed the way I raise my kids, and I mean the way we got stopped at a traffic stop, and I didn't have my insurance, my license, or my registration. And I told white police officer said, well, sir, let's get that next time you go on. And I drove off. I said, guys, turn the radio off. I said, I just need you to know that a lot of our friends, they wouldn't experience the same. And what do you mean, Daddy? And got to talk through it with them. So this is like, this starts with my family, right? And then as a church, I'm praying through things. So something happens in the news. And then I got to wrestle with, do I pray about it publicly every single time? Do I tweet about it every single time? All that, I feel that pressure. You know what I mean? Like, on Martin Luther King Day, I want to tweet and be like, I love, I care. But I don't just care today. Like, I feel that pressure and all the time. But I sit down with Shai and other African Americans and said, listen, here's how I'm thinking about praying. What should I see? Because we have white police officers, and then we have African Americans in our congregation. How do we navigate this? And how do we keep the gospel central? That's really good. And that's it's a good, it's a win, right? Because 5 years ago, like those thoughts don't come in your mind, and there's a segment of the church that feels like they don't think through me as I come in. But now, 5 years later, though we're not where we should be and where we hope that we would be, like, that's progress. That's the goal. That's what we want.
I think that's right on. I think, Gary, one of the things that you said, I think is very, very compelling. You said several compelling things, but one thing that really stands out is that you and Shai had this conversation in the context of friendship and relationship. And I think one of the things that we want to see in the body of Christ, and I know there's a lot of talk about multi-ethnic churches, I think the only way we're going to really move the needle on this significantly is to have diverse community. Because we saw this in the New Testament church, right? And so it's in the context of relationships forged, not just issues talked about, but relationships. As you get to know me, trust me, I trust you, we do life together, and then you observe me experience various kinds of prejudices that does create sensitivity. And it's not something that you just, it's not an issue at that point. It's a part of your life. It changes the way you see everything.
I mean, and I think that's what love does, though. As you mentioned, people grieving. I mean, this has got to be birthed out of love. Amen. Where, I mean, if Christ, who is so other from us, can love us, he teaches us to love one another.
Yes.
Obviously, brother, we could do years of this. And I look forward to that. I hope the Lord gives many more. But may God give us wisdom.
Amen. God bless you, brother. Amen.
That was such a beautiful, beautiful conversation that these young men had. And, Christians who love the Lord, and I'm seeing older ones and I'm seeing younger ones, but those that love the Lord, the Holy Spirit is raising them up and giving them a voice. And I've heard incredible testimonies, and even a Black young man and a white young man. For 10 years, God had brought them together for 10 years before they knew that the Black young man's ancestors had been slaves to the white young man's ancestors. And God is, he is a master at putting things together. And so he gave them 10 years of friendship building, where he knew that when that information came about, that they loved each other, respected each other enough that would not tear them apart. And so now they are going around the country and they are sharing that testimony. And so I'm looking at my pastor is really standing up, and there are members in our church who have joined an alliance called the oh my goodness, I shouldn't even try to say it now, but it is an alliance. And I will have two of those members on the show next week, a young white and a young Black young man. And so I'm just looking at all those that are desiring and have a heart for bringing together this great divide. God is bringing them before, and they are desiring, and God is using them to bring healing and restoration. Now, this is after almost 400 years, of lies and bigotry, of murder, of just plumb racism, greed, and trying to keep people Black people suppressed. But you know what? There were also Indians that were suppressed. There were white indentured slaves, and really I said indentured slave because that's what they were. They were told that they were somewhat better because the skin was white. But even today, we have our white brothers and sisters that are in poverty, and they are treated, they're even they are not getting the benefits that they need to be getting. And so there's a lot of work that the church needs to do in bringing about the true teachings of Jesus Christ. The Bible says, love your enemies, pray for them that despitefully use you, and say all manners of evil against you falsely for his sake. And so down through the years, down through the ages, there have been not only Black people, but all different ethnic groups of people who have suffered, who have been victims of racism and bigotry and population control and suppression. So I just believe that in this day, God is bringing especially the racism problem that started with the church here in America. He's bringing it back again and again, because he did bring it in 1906 to 1909 through a Black man, William Seymour. I spoke about that week before last in one of our sessions. And so they didn't get it right. We did not get it right. You know, I say we because Black people, we have to be willing to forgive. We do. You know, we have to forgive, and we have to be willing to have that earnest conversation too. And so that's what's happening at our church. And I'm praying that it will happen in your church. I'm praying that it will happen in the community to start bringing people together. Now, the only one that doesn't want this to happen is Satan. And he's the enemy of us all. And so I'm going to say good night to you. I want to thank you so much for joining. And you have a great, great evening. And see you next weekend. Or next Monday, let's say.